Well, hey, everyone, and welcome to episode number 25 of the Other Six Podcast. I am your host. My name is Chad Polk, and joining me once again in the studio, the author of the new hit Harry Potter musical, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, Matt Collins. Matt, how are you today, sir?
Man, I didn't know I was that busy working on the Harry Potter stuff.
You did a great job with it. It's sweeping the nation.
I want that paycheck.
That's right, that's right. And joining us from all the way across the table, our lead pastor, Adam Bishop. Adam, how are you today, sir?
Is this real? Like, I'm very curious right now. So,
No, it's not.
No, that's why I was saying I want
I was really hopeful.
I'm making puns because I like to do that. I'm a dad, and so the dad jokes flow. That's
I
what
like
works.
Harry Potter.
I like
Yeah?
Harry Potter too.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I didn't know how much I liked Harry Potter till I read all the books during the shutdown.
Right.
2020.
Yeah, once we had time. Huh?
Yeah. So good books. So Matt, get on that project. I'll be a big fan.
Yeah, if you can line that up for me, Chad, I'll do it.
You got it, buddy.
Awesome.
Yeah, but it's good to see you guys today. We had a real busy weekend. Obviously, there was a big event that happened this past weekend, the Super Bowl, and for a detailed analysis, we go live to Matt Collins.
Matt, what were your thoughts on the game?
Yeah,
My predictions were right. The Rams won.
They did.
Absolutely,
You're
they
2
did.
for 2. The national championship
That's
and the
true.
Super
That's
Bowl.
right.
I think I really only watched it for the Doctor Strange trailer and the halftime show.
Okay, and did you get everything you wanted out of it?
Everything I
Okay.
hoped and dreamed for happened.
So we got to talk about this halftime show just a little bit because kind of, the way I felt about it was if you ever attended a CD burning party.
That was it.
And I don't mean like where you would go and like burn like secular CDs or anything like that. I'm saying
No,
if
you burned
ever,
a CD for your friend.
Yeah, that's right. You would get together at a house. For those of you who don't know, you would get together at a house from someone who had Napster and like a CD burner on their computer.
LimeWire.
That's right.
FrostWire.
And you would spend the night there, and you would like order pizza, and you would take turns burning CDs, and then you had to buy the little book for your car that you stuck in there and the dashboard and all that. And if you ever did any of those things, if you ever downloaded a song on Napster, you probably thought the halftime show was like the greatest thing ever.
Oh, yeah.
If you never did, you may not have known who any of these people were.
So I've never felt older than I do in this moment right now, okay? Because when I look at you, I don't think that I'm that much older than you. But
No.
now I know. I'm substantially older than you because I have no idea what you're talking about.
Really?
You don't
None.
know any of the
No.
Napster?
I've heard of him. I never did any of those things.
Did you not?
No.
So
no.
now we're
Burn
seeing the
CDs?
difference between Generation X and Millennial over here. I guess
This is as an Xer, whenever Napster happened, that was past I was adulting by the
Wow.
time Napster started.
Okay.
So I don't even know what you're talking about.
Well.
I'm so thrown right now. I don't know how to respond. But we skipped right over the game.
Right,
So,
this is true.
and
Well,
I
that's
have-
because
no-
I don't know
put
who
it to
Doctor
me, and I
Strange
went
is
straight to
either,
music.
so I'm totally lost
Right,
right now.
sure, yeah.
Is Doctor Strange like a DB that came into the game
That's
later
right.
in a cover 5 coverage?
He's one of the rappers.
Yeah, he was the guy on the sidelines helping everybody out.
Oh, all right.
No, I'm kidding.
So,
No, he's a superhero. He was there for the commercials. Matt was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We certainly
I did like the commercials too.
Yeah.
I'll say
Okay,
that.
I liked the "Don't Be Like Larry" commercial,
Right.
the Larry David, where he's
Yeah,
like,
that's right.
"We don't use toilets. We go to the bathroom outside."
That's right.
we don't
No,
go
it's never gonna work.
Yeah, I thought that was funny. I liked the QR code commercial.
It was literally the most genius commercial I've ever seen. So as a marketing,
Right,
kind of nerd.
You mentioned a few weeks ago the QR codes had quite a comeback.
That's right. And
Yeah.
so I don't know how long it was on the screen. If you didn't see it, basically what they did is they took a QR code and those old DVD screensavers, like from the 90s and 2000s, where it would bounce around, you waited for it to go to the
Right.
corner, and it
Yeah.
never would.
Yeah.
But they put a QR code, and I don't know how long it was, 30 seconds at least.
It was at least 30
but
seconds.
it felt like a minute. And I read somewhere, and so everyone, of course, where I was at, pulled out their phone and went to the queue. And it was Coinbase, not that we're sponsored by Coinbase or anything, but that's who it was. And
Might be now.
Like to be.
I read that in less than a minute, they had over 20 million hits on their website.
That's just brilliant.
What?
It's genius.
Well, okay, so my boys, I'm trying. We had lots of food, kind of a big soup. We always do a big
Right.
party every year for
Right.
our kids and have fun. And so I'm, running around the kitchen, running around the living room, and they all like, Dad, take a picture. And I didn't know of what. And I look at the TV, and they were making me go up there, and
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, they knew what they were doing.
Right.
What a great marketing ploy. But no, I thought the game was a good game. I thought there was some calls that could have gone either way.
Sure.
You know, all that. I think that in a game like that, if you've got the better defensive line, that usually prevails, and that kind of is what happened. So, yeah, a good game. I'm happy for Matthew Stafford, the Georgia Bulldog. So, it's just been a good year for the Dogs, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, Sony Michel, tailback for the Dogs, for the Rams. But no, I thought the halftime show was interesting. I mean, you know, we could do an entire podcast giving analysis of halftime shows for the last 30 years.
Sure.
So Matt's like, all right, you know, that would be kind of fun.
You got one of those pictures again? So
you got it, buddy.
So the most famous story about a halftime show is, I think it was in 1990. It might have been 90 or 91. It was when Michael Jackson was doing the halftime show. They go to the halftime show, and he just stood there for like 60 seconds and didn't do anything. And so, like, people are losing their minds because the money.
Right.
So there's like this whole thing now about how all of that has to operate, you know, based on, and then you've got like, are they really singing? Are they lip syncing? You know, there's all that kind of stuff. So Friday, Morgan and I were in an antique store in Montgomery. Having a blast, if I might add.
Of course.
So I think antique stores are pretty cool.
All right.
So we were looking for like a table, which, you know, whatever. I gave my input on the table, but there's also there's the record section. So they got all these records, and then there was like an old pair of snow skis, and I'm like, maybe we should get these, you know. And I'm just, you know, that guy wandering around the antique store, and Morgan's. It's like,
I never knew I needed a jukebox.
It's like having a child with you in an antique store, because I'm like, we could use this somewhere, you know. We need a 50-foot Coca-Cola sign we can hang in the garage, you know. So all that stuff. So we're kind of having fun, just walking around, the kids, taking it all in. And it's kind of fun because you do feel like you're kind of being taken back in time.
Yeah.
Like when you walk through these antique stores. Until I rounded a corner, curve, whatever. And there was a license plate that said Wallace for president. And I'm like, really? Like, we're going to have that in here?
Wow.
Okay. So anytime you go back into the past, you can reminisce and you can go like, I wonder what that would have been like. And are those really the good old days? And then you're confronted with, oh yeah, what was also going in the past was an immense amount of racism.
Right.
And segregation and Jim Crow laws. And a guy named George Wallace, who was the governor of Alabama, because he ran off of a platform where he literally said, segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. That got him elected governor of this state. He then in 1968 ran for president on that platform. That's a decade before I was born.
Wow.
That's not that long ago.
No.
Right.
It's bad enough that he ran for president on that platform. It's worse when you consider he carried Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Arkansas. Can you imagine being a black person, being alive in 1968, living in one of those states?
Wow.
Yeah.
And so it kind of ruined the experience.
Yeah.
You know, I'm walking around having a great time in this antique store, and then I'm like, you know, in this state, with our history, I'm not so sure that license plate needs to be hanging up there.
Yeah, no kidding.
You know, and I was born and raised in Georgia. So, you know, don't hear me saying this is an Alabama issue.
Right.
You know, the town I was born in, Fitzgerald, Georgia. We moved to Kennesaw, Georgia when I was a kid. So I didn't grow up in Fitzgerald, but I was born there. My parents were born there. My grandparents were born there. My grandparents are buried there. So that's kind of, I guess, you know, it's not really my hometown. It's where I was born. My hometown, I consider Kennesaw. Fitzgerald, Georgia had segregated proms until the year 2000.
You're kidding.
What?
So, you know, when you really kind of like pull back for a second and you think about like our country and our history and all these different kind of things, you know, I think the phrase is e pluribus unum. Is that the phrase? Out of many, one?
Yeah.
We're almost 250 years old as a country. I don't think we've gotten that one right yet.
Right.
That out of many, one. Because there's many who have kind of been left behind, set aside, ignored, segregated against. So when you talk about like our history as a country, it's easy to then conclude, wow, the South is terrible. Racism is such a Southern issue. Well, that narrative, unfortunately, just doesn't hold up. I mean, Martin Luther King Jr., he called Birmingham, Alabama, the most racist place in America until he went to Chicago. He issued a public apology to Birmingham and said, no, it's Chicago. Wow. So, and I'm bringing all of this up to get us to the halftime show. One of the places in America that has a really bad past when it comes to race relations is Los Angeles. People think of racism and they think of it as a Southern issue and the Jim Crow laws of the South, but you could go do a whole analysis of race relations in Southern California, Los Angeles specifically. You've got to address the Watts riots. You've got to address the Rodney King trial. There's this whole thing happening. There's a reason why Compton is a place that we recognize. Well, Compton is not that far from Beverly Hills,
Right.
if you look at it geographically. So Dr. Dre grows up in Compton. There's no advantage in his life that should lead him to be someone who is like doing a halftime show.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So if you see like what he's done in his lifetime, I think it's pretty remarkable to go from where he came from in that neighborhood to now, all these years later, the most expensive stadium that's ever been built.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He's doing the halftime show in his city. Like, that's a significant moment to at least acknowledge, whether you like the music or not,
Sure.
whether you think it's appropriate or not, whether you agree with the lyrics or not. You've at least got to pull back for a second and go, that felt like a significant thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, Dr. Dre is a guy who transcended not from just being an artist to owning labels.
Yeah, he owned a label.
So, Matt knows this better than me, but the amount of musicians and the amount of employees and the amount of people who literally they have a living now because of what he did.
Right.
He's making a difference right there.
Right. So if we want to cross over, I could make a really strong argument without Dr. Dre, there's no DC Talk. There's no Toby Mac.
Oh, wow.
There's no
Yeah.
Lecrae. There's artists now that we have who are using that style of music with the message that we would prefer.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily resonate with his message of his songs, but I understand what he did was he brought this this art form into the mainstream and opened up opportunities that we now see Christian artists who are speaking the gospel into parts of our society that otherwise would have not had that opportunity to do so.
Right.
And Toby Mac, in my opinion, has followed Dr. Dre's trail. Toby Mac started off as an artist who now owns a label.
Yep.
And from Colton Dixon to all these other Christian artists that we could talk about who are now on his label. Well, that doesn't happen without a trailblazer like Dr. Dre to kind of, pave the way.
Yeah.
And so, I understand that there's probably some differing opinions on the actual content of the halftime show. And I get that.
Sure.
Whether it's appropriate, whether it's, God honoring, and we could certainly have that discussion. And I think most people would know what side of the discussion I would land on.
Sure.
But I think sometimes it's helpful to pull back for a second and try to look at things from a larger perspective. And I remember as a high school kid, I grew up like I couldn't listen to anything but Christian music.
Right.
That was kind of the rule in my house.
Right.
But I also played basketball and football. And in all of the locker rooms I was in, like, that's what was playing. It was Dr.
that's what
Dre,
you
it was
heard,
Snoop
huh?
Dogg, it was Tupac, it was
Yeah.
Biggie Smalls, it was all these guys.
Yeah.
And everybody I played ball with loved it.
Right.
And at some point, I'm like, I wonder why. So I liked the way it sounded. I just didn't like the lyrics. And so I just started asking questions. And I had some friends who, their backgrounds are different than mine. Their skin color was different than mine. But they helped me understand why that music resonated with a community that maybe I didn't have as much experience with. So I have an appreciation, for that.
Right. Yeah.
And, if you're from a previous generation and you're listening to this podcast and nothing I'm saying is making any sense and you're wondering why I just didn't turn it off, think of Dr. Dre as like my generation's Frank Sinatra. So like Frank Sinatra says, I did it my way.
Right.
So you probably appreciated Frank Sinatra's music. You respected the talent. I bet you didn't agree with what he was doing off stage.
Right. Right.
So those stories are legendary,
Oh, my
right?
gosh,
so
yeah.
it's similar to that.
Yeah.
And I do think at times, when you're walking with the Lord, you have to learn how to be in the world and not of it.
Right.
The thing I recognized years ago was after the Super Bowl, and I recognized this when I was a kid, because I've always loved football.
Sure.
But I recognized probably about the time I was in the 7th or 8th grade that when I went to school the Monday after the Super Bowl, nobody was talking about the game. They were talking about the commercials and the halftime show.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly
And so if you want to be able to participate in the conversations that are happening as a greater society, it's helpful sometimes to know, well, what are people talking about?
Yeah.
Right.
Can you speak intelligently towards that, or are you just against it?
Right.
Well, that's just bad. That's just evil. Well, okay, but if you want to engage people who don't know the Lord in conversation, sometimes you've got to meet them where they're at. It doesn't mean you need to go buy the music.
Right.
It
No.
doesn't even mean you have to like it.
Right.
It just means if you could understand for a second, why do so many people like that? Try to understand that reason. And then if you can communicate and understand and build a friendship with somebody who's different, again, we've talked about this before on this podcast.
Yeah.
My motivation for everything is to lead people to the Lord.
That's right.
Right.
And I don't want to just lead people to the Lord who look like me.
Right.
Who grew up in a cul-de-sac in Kennesaw. Okay.
Yeah.
Like I had a pretty easy time growing up. All right. I want to try to lead people to the Lord whose backgrounds are different than mine. Well, it might be helpful to know a little bit about what drives them. And so I thought that the Super Bowl halftime show was the first halftime show we've had that opened up that conversation.
Opened that door up,
I
yeah.
think there's been others that the performances were fine,
Right.
the music was fine, but I don't think they were as significant to be in that city with those artists who grew up in their neighborhood on that stage. I just thought it was significant. And I know we got a lot to talk about from the message, but
Yeah.
I think
No, that's
we're
incredible.
talking about culture at large in
Yeah.
this series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I rattled off a bunch of stuff, in our first week of what culture's like, and I don't agree with it.
Right.
So I don't agree with the message. I don't agree with the lyrics. I don't agree with a lot of it. But there's a lot of people that speaks to them. And if you can understand why, maybe you can ultimately find a connecting point where,
You can
well, let me
start
tell you
having
what
a
speaks to
conversation
me.
with them.
Right. That's right.
The Lord.
Yeah. That's
right.
Following Jesus. And so, yeah, that's all. And then I do think maybe, my boys, that style of music, it's all that resonates with them. So like Lecrae is probably our favorite artist.
Right.
Yeah.
We listen to a lot of music from Lecrae. So what's been helpful for me as a dad is Lecrae in his songs, he talks about a lot of these issues.
Yeah.
But he does it from a biblical perspective. He does it without obscenities. He does it without inappropriate things.
Right.
It's been awesome.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
when my boys ask me questions, we can have these conversations without all the baggage.
Right.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I thought it was a pretty
Absolutely.
significant thing. And I think that we're talking about parenting. We're talking to grandparents. If you want to know what your kids are listening to, if you want to know the songs and the things they're hearing about at school,
Right.
like, there you go.
Yeah.
So how do you now speak into that? Are you just against it? Or do you engage it?
Right.
And if you engage it and you engage it with them, you'll have a voice in their life.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's ultimately kind of what we're going for.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's-
absolutely.
That's really wise.
So interesting point. You mentioned Wallace a second ago. When after the assassination attempt, after the failed presidency run, some of his supporters bought him a house here in Montgomery on a road called Fitzgerald Road, and they added on the back, handicap accessible as he was in a wheelchair, and we found out that is the house that we live in.
I was about to say, I know you live on Fitzgerald
That
Road.
is correct.
So it's
Yep.
that house?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
When-
we are pretty sure about it. We're pretty
Wow.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
There's a lot of evidence pointing to it. So anyway, that's just an interesting tidbit. Anyway.
And I think,
Wow.
let's tie a bow on this.
Sure.
Okay. There's a whole bunch of racists who Jesus has saved.
That's right.
So, somebody can have a part of their life where they were wrong.
Right.
Here's what that's called. For all of us are sinners.
That's exactly right.
So anybody that's a part of their past, we're not crucifying them because Jesus was crucified in their place.
That's right.
And he can save them too. So, the worst racist, the worst whatever, like Jesus' death on the cross is sufficient for them.
That's right.
But, that doesn't mean that we don't talk about it being wrong.
What
Right.
can we learn from that?
Right,
Yeah.
but
How
Jesus
we do
can
better?
still save people. He still does it every single week.
That's
He
exactly
transforms
right.
people's hearts. And so ultimately, that's what we pray for with
Right.
people. But when you have to acknowledge a systemic pattern that was in place for a significant part of our nation's history,
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
still dealing with the repercussions of that.
You got to call
And-
it into the light.
Yeah, and we want to be a place as a community of faith here in Montgomery, Alabama, where we are united by Jesus Christ from a multiple different backgrounds.
Right.
And I think that's one of the testimonies of our church is that we're not a perfect church, but we've got diversity because we choose to focus on what unites us, not
That's
the
right.
things that the world tells us should divide us.
That's right.
Right.
That's exactly right. Speaking of kids and music, I know you and I both had some children at our student weekend this past weekend, Be a Light, and man, what an incredible weekend they had. I mean, how many kids did Justin say
think he had,
students
like,
did they have?
It was close to 70, something
it's
like
just
that.
incredible.
Yeah.
And so they had a great night on Friday night. They were up here playing games. I
Yeah.
know Saturday they had a service time,
Yeah.
both in West Montgomery and out at Pike Pike Road, doing all kinds of stuff. And then they had a great worship time and on I believe Saturday night.
Saturday night, yeah.
And then I know they competed. They amounted points. My daughter came home with her team, won the bronze plunger. So that was the trophy that they won.
I was wondering what those were doing.
Bro,
floating around
she's
the
so
church.
excited about it. I mean, she's like, Dad, we won the bronze
They
plunger. I'm
weren't
like, that's
used,
great.
right?
What is that? Yeah,
They
I
weren't
hope-
used, right?
I hope not.
I'm really proud of our students. This whole Be a Light, we talked about Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, ends
Yeah.
of the earth. So part of that was we want to be a light in East Montgomery and Pike Road with no strings attached.
That's right.
So we've got half of them on Saturday. They're out at Pike Road Elementary. They worked.
Yeah.
Morgan was out there with that crew. So she was one of the adults who was there with them. So she saw firsthand. I mean, they put out straw, they put out mulch. They worked really, really hard. And then the other gang went to Mercy House in West Montgomery,
Sure.
which is one of our partners in the
Yeah.
Be a Light. So literally 2 of the initiatives in this offering, our students were on the ground all day Saturday serving. And what's pretty cool about that is you don't get 2 places more different than Pike Road Elementary and where Mercy House is
That's
located
right.
in
Yeah.
West Montgomery. Probably most of the kids that were down there on Saturday had never been to that part of town. And there are houses on that road because I've been down there and spent time with Pastor Ken Austin that they don't have running water.
Man.
It is in some ways like going to a developing nation, and it's right here in our own city.
right.
So we're not called to just be a light right here in the immediate vicinity of Vaughn Forest Church. We really feel like that Jesus has placed this church here to be a light to our entire city.
Right.
And to see our teenagers doing that was pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Justin told us yesterday that some of our students, our students that were down there at Mercy House met up with some of the teenagers that live there in that neighborhood. They're going to start going down there for a Bible study.
That's awesome.
So these weekends have a significant impact in real time, but then the fruit from those weekends goes on and on and on. So back in the day, Chad and Matt, when we were growing up, if you wanted to get a bunch of teenagers to a church, give them free pizza, let them play kickball.
That's right.
Dodgeball,
And dodgeball,
Yeah.
we can't. That's outlawed now. It's too dangerous.
They took the rubber balls away,
It's
and
like
then they
you
gave us the foam
can
ones.
throw like a one of the little squishy things
Yeah,
at somebody.
yeah.
No.
But now it's give them opportunities to serve.
Yeah.
These kids want to make an impact with their lives.
That's so great.
So, they show up, they work hard, they make a difference, they understand what it means to be a light, and then they still have some fun.
Right.
Yeah.
So, what a great weekend. I'm super proud of our students. I know Lena was there and Sam was there and the older kids were there and they did such a great job. So,
Yeah.
awesome weekend. Really proud
Yeah.
of them. I'm sure Justin's exhausted.
Oh, yeah.
So, grateful for his leadership
Well,
as well.
he had that, and then he had his son's birthday, and then also had
He had-
Valentine's Day. So yeah, he's probably in a coma
Yeah.
somewhere. He's been serving.
Katie, we're sorry.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
She's like, I kind of got the shaft on Valentine's Day. So
Right.
something, maybe he did great. I haven't asked.
No,
But
I'm sure. I'm sure he did.
he managed it all.
That's
Yeah,
right.
good
Yeah,
We're
job.
he
super
did.
proud
Good job,
of Justin. He
Justin.
does a great job.
Justin's weekend.
That's right. And then that's right. And then Sunday, I want to talk a little bit about Discover Vaughn Forest because we had an incredible time at Discover Vaughn Forest. If you're listening and you don't know what that is, Discover Vaughn Forest takes place about once every month and a half or so.
Yeah, 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, and we just invite folks that are new to Vaughn Forest to come and kind of learn a little bit about where we've been, where we're going. It's for families. There's free food, and so we had a bunch of new
Yeah.
folks come and check that out. I
Yeah.
was really impressed. How many families do we have? Like 7 or 8, I think.
I thought it was 4 or 5.
I don't know.
It was a- it was a bunch.
PJ
Yeah.
manages.
Yeah,
I just sit up there and talk.
Right.
You know? I don't know how many. There was a lot of people in
There's
the
a
room.
lot.
There was. That's
Yeah.
absolutely right.
So we talked about diversity earlier when it comes to like our ethnic backgrounds. The other thing that's fun about our church is the diversity when it comes to generations.
Yeah,
and we
that's
saw that at Discover Vaughn Forest that we had literally every generation that we minister to as a church represented in that room.
Right.
Which is really cool to see.
Yeah.
Right.
If we and here's what's fun about that in the middle of a parenting series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, somebody would go, well, you probably only have people who are parents coming to your church right now. I was like, no, we have
Yeah.
people from all different generations
Crazy.
coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is fun to be in there and And really, if you're new to Vaughn Forest, on a Sunday, the three of us, you get stuck with us.
We're sorry.
And then, unfortunately, you're stuck with the same three of us in this podcast,
Right.
But we've got a really great team of people here that make this place go.
That's right.
So part of what makes Discover Vaughn Forest really good is you get to hear from them.
Right.
Yeah.
Each person on our staff shares, and they do such a fantastic job. And one of the things we've talked about on this podcast is, we're 25 episodes in?
Yeah.
So we can
Number
rent a
25.
car now, so that's
That's
good.
right.
Rent a car,
So,
our insurance goes down.
all the fun things. So over the next 25 episodes, we're going to explore some different, formats with this, but we're going to try to incorporate, more folks from our team
That's right.
into this as well. So that you don't have to just come to Discover Vaughn Forest,
Yeah.
to feel like you kind of get to know them as well.
Yeah,
Right,
absolutely.
yeah.
But it was good, a good time.
Well, it was a great weekend, and obviously we continued in our message series. It's not just a phase, talking about parenting in a post-pandemic world, and we talked about marriage this past week, which I know
Marriage.
marriage
I'm sorry.
is what brings us together
I can't help
today.
it.
That's
I've
right.
always wanted to do that in a sermon.
Right.
I'm not bold enough to do a sermon.
You know,
You should have. You would have heard me laughing.
I've only done, I think, 1 or 2 weddings, and I've always wanted to do the love, true love.
Don't
that's not happening.
You've only done one. We got to get you doing more weddings. It's really fun to officiate a wedding.
Yeah.
I love officiating weddings.
I have a buddy. Never mind, I'm not gonna tell.
Oh,
you.
yeah,
Anyway,
all right. Get into the
Yeah,
No,
but
that's-
we talked about marriage.
Squirrel.
That's right.
Yeah.
This past week, which some folks might think is odd in a parenting series, but you did a great job kind of explaining how to be good parents, it starts with a good marriage, and so I kind of want to just kick this off by talking about why do you think our marriages are under such attack, and do you think it's worse now, post or during pandemic than it was pre-pandemic? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, much worse. Never been more difficult. And the whole idea, I could have saved everybody some time with the sermon. If the parents are okay, the kids are okay.
Well, there you go.
Let's pray and go home.
That's in the bullet
now,
point, yeah.
Now, how do you actually make it okay?
Right.
So here's why it's harder than ever before. Here's why it's worse than it's ever been before. Most of that, in my opinion, has really come about in the last 10 to 15 years from the development of social media. So I was telling somebody the other day, Morgan and I, we met, we started dating, and we got engaged, and we got married before Facebook, before Twitter, before YouTube, that's how old I am. None of those things existed,
You
okay?
didn't do the burning party.
So
That's right.
MySpace, name it. None of those things existed, okay? So we've seen all of those things come about in our married life.
Right.
And so we've kind of been in tune to then what happens. And the biggest thing that happens is married couples compare their marriage to other married couples.
Right.
And, somebody's posted their, vacation photo album. There's nothing wrong with going on vacation. There's nothing wrong with posting photos from the album.
Sure.
But if you can't see somebody's vacation without getting bitter or mad that you didn't get on that vacation,
Right.
like you might need to take a break for a little
Right,
while, okay?
right.
So the other thing that's been really unfortunate is social media has been a mechanism that a lot of people have reconnected with somebody they dated in the past. So, back in the day, like if you broke up with somebody in high school or you broke up with somebody in college and then you eventually met the person you married, like you stayed married to that person and like hoped you didn't run into the other person at Applebee's or something like that, So, those days are over. Now it's like you get to have an up close and personal view of their entire life. And for a lot of people in a marriage, they let the enemy get into their marriage through their thought life because they begin to think things like, well, maybe I married the wrong person. Maybe I should have married him. Maybe I should have married her. Look at how great their life is. That was the person, that was my first love. I made a mistake.
Right.
And so all of that was going on pre-COVID.
Right.
Well, now let everybody stay home for 4 months.
Sit on that.
And drink too much and eat too much and binge watch too much and be completely freaked out. Oh, by the way, their kids are in the other room doing school. Okay, do I need to say anything else?
Right, that's right.
Okay, so one of the things that caused a lot of people stress during the shutdown is they couldn't have their affairs anymore. So, you got married people who are having affairs and now all of a sudden they can't have the affair anymore and that's creating anxiety and stress in their life. This is how dysfunctional our society is right now when it comes to marriage. The idea that like a man and a woman can love each other selflessly for a lifetime, I mean, most people think that's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Most people think that you get one free pass in marriage. So, meaning you marry the wrong person. So get it right the second marriage.
Wow.
That's what I mean by the free pass. It's like, yeah, most people, it doesn't usually work out with the first person you marry. It's okay. It should work out with the second person you marry. Most people who get married now, statistically speaking, in their 20s, that marriage does not last. It's the second marriage that maybe has a chance. So when I say our marriages are under attack, now here's where things have really gotten interesting. All the things I just described are also going on inside the church.
Right.
So it used to be, well, that's how things are in the world. Well,
it's no different.
We have to be really careful as pastors because people share things with us in confidence and all that. But, marriages are also in trouble in our churches.
Right.
And I said this a few weeks ago from Jason, my brother-in-law. He's mentioned this before. If everything I just says bothers you, there might be a challenge you need to take before the Lord. Hopefully everything I said, it makes you feel broken.
Right.
It doesn't make you feel bothered.
Right.
Those things break my heart. So what are we trying to do as a church? Not say we've got it all right, start acting like us.
Sure.
No, we're not trying to say that. What I'm trying to say is if you build a healthy boundary around your marriage that keeps all of the things I just described out,
right,
it's still hard. But if you haven't built the healthy boundary to keep all of those things out, I don't know if you have a chance.
Right.
That's how much our marriages are under attack these days. And, I finished teaching the second service on Sunday, and I come out in the lobby, and a gentleman in our church comes up to me, and he says, appreciate what you said today. That was really good. And I said, I appreciate you. I said, just curious, how many years you've been married? And he said, next month will be 59 years.
Wow.
And I said, well, next time we do a marriage message, you're up. I said, you're teaching next time. And he laughed, and we had a good conversation. And so, I've been married 19 years. So these are the things the Lord has shown me so far. But I think that seeing the challenges is probably something that, again, my generation might be a little bit more in tune with, because all of these things came about while we were married.
Right.
They didn't exist when Morgan and I got married. They've all grown since we've been married. So we've had to put healthy boundaries in place, in our marriage, because we just know that, anything that the enemy can use, he will.
Right.
Yeah.
So you just have to be
right.
aware of it. And so I think that the last 2 years has accelerated some things. I think it's made some things worse. But then I'd say that for some married couples, the last 2 years has been a blessing. Maybe it took that for them to get honest about what was really going on in the marriage.
Yeah.
That's right.
So, the goal was to speak to marriages that are hurting, marriages that need some help. But certainly I'm sure there's some married couples that would go, man, the last 2 years, the Lord's really did some good things. And so we celebrate that as well.
That's right. Going back to what you were just talking about, how, it used to be in the church was one way and the world was a different way. Now it's the same in both. I think there's a tendency, especially in the church, to feel like you have to present a good front, a good face. You have to cover up what's actually happening.
Yeah, you got to have it all put together.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Whereas in the world, folks, don't really care to hide that up. And so, my encouragement would be, you talked about the Christian counseling that we're offering now for free.
Yeah.
If you're going through that, man, contact us about that. Talk to a friend, come talk to a pastor. There's no reason to hide that stuff. We're here, folks are here to help, and the church is here to help and to be, there for you in your life when you're walking through these times.
Yeah, one of the messages of the church is it's okay if you're not okay.
That's right.
It's just not okay to stay there.
That's right.
Because if you stay there, it's going to destroy your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
So and the Lord is how you keep from staying there.
Right.
Not a bunch of church people.
Right.
We're all trying to walk with the Lord daily as well. And the Lord loves us the same, whether we get off the path or not. But the longer we walk with the Lord, what we realize is all the things He tells us to do in His Word are for our good.
Right.
That if we will obey, it's actually for our protection.
Right.
It's not to keep us from experiencing things. It's to keep us. It's not to keep us from experiencing good things. It's to keep us from experiencing bad things.
Right.
Yeah.
So that the longer you walk with the Lord, the more like what God's Word says starts to make sense, because you're like, oh yeah. That's destruction.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about these 4 foxes, man. You mentioned them before. I think it was in August.
Yeah,
right?
August 21st when we did the interview, the foxes that attack marriage.
Yeah. So the first one is the fox of finance. I want to break it up into 2 things. How does it attack our marriage? And then how do we protect against that?
Everybody wants to live on more than they have.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, because there's things that we think we need that we don't really need.
Yeah, it goes
That's
back to the Instagram stuff.
Yeah, it's a universal challenge, you
Yeah.
know. A fun example to do in a life group, I've done this a number of times with couples over the years, is, you know, think back to this time 10 years ago, what was going on in your life. And, you know, what income was happening in your life. Maybe you had an hourly job, maybe you worked at a gas station, maybe
Yeah.
you were still in college, maybe you'd already started your career wherever you were. And then think about where you are right now. Like, is there, and I don't make them say this out loud, it's like, now, is there a difference in the money? Now, if you could go back to yourself 10 years ago and say, 10 years from now, you'll be making this, would you have thought that would have been enough? And almost inevitably, they always go, well, yeah.
Yeah.
I go, was it enough? And it's like, well, no. So, you know, what happens is you get into this perpetual, like, I've
Yeah.
got to have more, I've got to have more, I've got to
Yeah.
have more. And, you know, we didn't have time to go into all this in the message, but one of the shifts that's happened in our culture is the availability of credit.
Right.
So it used to be really hard to get a credit card.
Right.
Yeah.
Not the case. So my boys can't believe that credit cards are legal.
Oh yeah.
They just can't believe it. So
People that way,
I
man.
explain it to them, and they're just like, "That just sounds so unfair." And I'm like, "Yeah, I hear you." And so that's what happens
Yeah.
is even if you don't have the money, that doesn't keep you from making the purchase.
Right.
Can I
yeah.
tell you how I got my first credit card? They came to college when I was a freshman and offered me a free Papa John's pizza if I signed up for their credit card.
And you're like, hey,
oh yeah, man, I got that pizza. It was delicious.
Want the pizza?
Yeah. And so that it just you wake up one day and you're like, oh wow, we've got $40,000 of
That's right.
credit card
Yeah.
debt. You know, it just takes two people being on the same page with money. And if they can't get on the same page, you've got to bring in a counselor to help them get on the same page.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it's not that you need more money. That's the lie. The lie is if we just made more money, we'd be content. No.
Right.
Yeah.
If you can't be content with where you are right now, more money won't solve that.
Right.
So, yeah, you know, it's not an easy one. But for some couples, they get it right.
Yeah.
And with a little authenticity and humility, it sometimes God may bring one of those couples into your life. I mean, you don't have to open up all your financial stuff to them, but like there may be a couple that's like, that's really not our fox.
Yeah.
Right.
And you're like, how? And they may be able to kind of show you.
Yeah.
And I think that's just helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So your second fox, you talked about the fox of faith and how that can be difficult for some folks. And one of the things you recommended was for couples, you know, to pray together. But I think that sometimes that can be tough. So what are some tips maybe that you have for couples to begin that and continue that time of praying together?
So if you're in a marriage with somebody who is not walking with the Lord to the extent that you wish they were, faith is not as important to them as you wish it was.
Sure.
The best advice I could give you is to go ahead and start treating them as if that were the case.
Right.
The longer you hold that over their head and the longer you try to manipulate them into being what you want them to be, that's just going to demotivate them. So just go ahead and treat them as if they're already acting that way. And I've seen a number of times over the years where like a wife would do that with her husband. Like she quit nagging him to go to church on Sunday and just went ahead and started treating him like he was a God-honoring man and he felt respected. And now he became a little less defensive towards these church invites.
Sure.
You know, same thing with a guy who's, you know, he's got a wife and she has no, I mean, I could give you a story of a couple I know really well. He came to faith in the Lord and she wouldn't have anything to do with it. And he prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed. And she was a singer. Like, so she's like really good singer. So she's
wow.
going and doing these shows and he's going and just praying the whole time she's up there singing and she's not singing about the Lord. And this went on for a while. And eventually she gave her life to the Lord and now she's a worship leader at a church.
Oh, that's awesome.
You know, so there are plenty of stories where the spouse who was walking with the Lord prayed their spouse into that place.
Right.
Treated them with kindness and love and respect until that came. But if you try to like talk them into it in negative ways,
Yeah.
it's probably going to backfire. And that's a hard one. But I think it's probably the only option you have if you want it to really get to a place where it's fruitful.
Sure.
Well, let's talk about the fox of family. He talked about this and it being probably one of the more difficult ones because it's people you care about. The list, you know, of things that you struggle with was, you know, making decisions based on how your parents feel, feeling like your spouse aligns with your parents and not you, and then being drugged back into family drama. So how do we protect against those? Like that's a tough one. Man.
All at once?
All at once.
Who's going to give the first example about their in-laws?
Yeah. I was kind of waiting
So
for
there
you
was
guys.
this one time.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I feel really blessed. My in-laws are amazing.
Yeah.
And this, thankfully for us, has never been a fox.
Yeah.
Because it just hasn't.
Yeah.
So, but man, oh man, have I talked to some people over the years that it has been.
Yeah.
And it is the most challenging one because it's really difficult. Mm-hmm. And it can sound mean-spirited.
Right.
You know, it's because it's your parents.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you get parents who like to quote verses out of context. We're like, doesn't the Bible say children obey the Lord?
Right.
You know? And I'm like, well, the key word in that verse is children, you know? Now, conversely, like I've had to tell couples before, you know, your parents are still sending you money every month. So like until you can figure out how to live on your own,
You still
like,
a kiddo, man.
when you get that money, you also get their input into
Yeah.
your life.
Right,
You know,
yeah.
they want the money, but they don't. It's like
They're paying
that's
for the input.
dysfunctional.
That's
yeah,
right.
so
That's right.
there's so many things. You know, clear boundaries. The big thing is that the only two people who have to be on the same page are the two people in the marriage.
Right.
So you just need to get on the same page with your spouse and be honest.
Yeah.
And when your spouse is honest with you, man, I'm going to upset somebody here. When your spouse is honest with you, don't be the spouse who then says, well, you're hurting my feelings. Don't turn it around and make it about you.
Right.
That's manipulative, it's dysfunctional, and it's unhealthy. So ladies, if your husband gets to a place where he honestly expresses something to you and he doesn't yell, he doesn't curse, he's not being harsh, he just says, this bothers me. Don't flip it and make it about you now and act like he's hurting your feelings. Don't you want him to be honest with you?
Sure.
Like this is, so if he does, listen to him. It might sting a little bit. You can say like, okay, I heard what you said. Would you mind giving me, you know, a little while to just kind of process that? I'd love for us to talk about that in a way where maybe we can find something that works for us. You don't have to respond in real time. You know, same thing with you guys. Like if your wife comes to you and she says something that's bothering you, like don't storm out of the room. Like don't slam a door. Like don't be a punk. Don't be mean. Don't
Right.
be a jerk. Don't be rude. Like listen. And if it makes you mad, go, okay, I hear you. I'm glad you told me that. I don't like anything you just said. So can you give me a few minutes? Like, I don't want to respond out of frustration.
Yeah.
Because I'm grateful that you're being honest with me right now.
Right.
I've said that to Morgan before.
Oh, wow.
Now, I've said that to her before because a marriage counselor told me next time she says, this is how you respond. Because I had responded the wrong way
Yeah, I'm
before.
reading it off of a
I
card.
don't like what you just said, but I can appreciate the fact that you're honest with me.
Yeah.
I need a minute.
Right.
You know, that's okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, it takes that level of honesty in a marriage. You know, a spouse should never have to apologize for being completely honest with their spouse. Marriage is about being open. If you feel like you can't be open with your spouse because of how he or she might react, you need to go sit down with a marriage counselor. There's some manipulation going on in that marriage, and it's not healthy.
Right.
And you may not notice it right now, but all I hear is a fox gnawing at those roots. So you should be able to express yourself. So again, when it comes to your extended family, you've got to have a biblical foundation to guide this. Leave and cleave to become one. The only unique relationship I have in this world is with my wife, Morgan. That's not my definition. That's God's definition. So Morgan is my family. Two have become one. My mom and dad are no longer my family.
Right.
Her mom and dad are no longer her family. They are our extended family. We show them incredible kindness and respect and love, but it is conditional. If something were to happen and that relationship changed because of something that one of them did, I wouldn't feel any guilt over that.
Right.
Yeah.
If something were to happen and it violated some principle or some values that we've built in our family, you know, I would hate to have to go down that road, but, you know, my boys get married one day, like, I'm not their family anymore.
Right.
God says they're leaving my house. My job is to raise them so they'll leave.
Yeah. That's
Biblically
right.
speaking.
That's right. That's absolutely
I
right.
want them to stay as long as they want. Well, I love them. But if that motivation drives me in parenting, I'm going to raise some unhealthy men.
That's right.
Yeah.
So my job is to raise them where they will leave and they will serve their godly wives the way Jesus serves the church.
Right.
And they will have their own household and they will have their own family. And it's my responsibility then in that season of life to serve them however they see fit.
That's right.
You know, not to tell them where they're supposed to eat on Thanksgiving Day. That's right. You know, so there's just got to be some healthy boundaries there where you communicate those. And, you know, the thing that I would tell, maybe you're listening to this and you're like, you make it sound so easy. Man, if you knew, I'm like, here's what I would tell you. Like, love usually prevails. Like, you know, if you tell somebody in your extended family, like, we're not going to make it or we're going to do something different this year, I'm not saying they're going to be happy.
Right.
They might get upset and they'll come around because they love you.
That's right.
Yeah.
And love prevails and they'll get over it and they'll be fine. And COVID kind of did a little bit of that.
Yeah.
So, you know, people who thought we could never not do this on Easter Sunday, I bet you didn't do it on Easter 2020.
That's right.
So, you know, there were some things that had been built in that some people were like, man, we can't wait to get back to that. And that's fine. Other people were like, why were we ever doing that to begin with? No one enjoyed it.
Right.
And so I think there has been a little bit of that where people recognize maybe there's some things I can do differently and stuff like that. But, you know, that little action step I think is really helpful for couples. Just don't make a commitment.
Yeah.
You know, if my parents call me and say like, hey, you know, we're seeing if blah, 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 like they know I'm going to say like, hey, thank you so much. Like, let me check with Morgan. Let me make sure we don't have anything going on. And they're like, yeah, no problem. Like, it's
Right.
not even, they know that's what we're going to do. And
Right.
Morgan's parents know that's what she's going to do.
That's right.
And they're fine with that because they know we're busy. And it's not an issue. But, you know, I think that sometimes it's just easier to go, oh, yeah, that's not going to be a problem at all. And just commit.
Right.
But you just never know, like, if your spouse might have already, like, committed to something else or, like, you
Yeah.
know, maybe they just wanted to spend a night at home and
That's
they were
right.
tired. You know,
Yeah.
it's just little things that become big things.
Right.
So if you can address it when it's a little thing and keep it from becoming a big thing, I think that's a helpful thing. So that's kind of what we're going for. We're not trying to be mean-spirited. We're not trying to be jerks. We're just trying to love people well. And it's hard to love people well if you haven't built some really healthy boundaries.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, the last Fox was on communication. You touched on this a little bit with what you just said. You know, this is one of the ones like that I've struggled with communication. Like, you know, this is what I said. Well, that may not be what they heard. You know, and you know, and so how do you? And this is my biggest question: how do you communicate clearly when you're with your spouse? When you're so frustrated or when you're angry or when they're not, you don't feel like they're communicating in the right way. In that heat of that moment, how do you communicate clearly?
I think you do what he says. Just
So
pause.
you don't match. Okay, so I'm gonna give you some rules
Sure.
that I've learned over the years in marriage counseling. Okay, the first rule is you don't match emotions.
Okay.
So there are going to be times where your spouse gets really upset, frustrated, angry, mad, hurt, whatever the emotion may be. When your spouse begins to communicate that emotion, you don't respond to that emotion.
Okay.
So let's just, you know, for example, we'll use you. So like, let's say, you know, Chad is really angry and he expresses anger. You know, Christy's natural tendency is going to be to match your anger with her anger.
Right.
Well, the moment that happens, there's really no hope for the rest of that conversation
right.
going well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but we all have that tendency to be like, really? Like, we're going to do this now? Okay, my turn.
Right.
If the other spouse says part of, and this is so hard, but when I started applying the one another passages to my marriage in the New Testament and changed my marriage, one of those passages says, make allowances for one another's grievances and faults. Make an allowance.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, so she's angry. I'm going to make an allowance. I'm going to allow for that right now. I'm not going to respond to that anger. I'm actually going to allow for that. I'm going to be okay with that. I'm going to absorb that for a
Wow.
second.
Okay.
Because it seems like my spouse is really angry, and I'm going to make an allowance for that. And there's a good chance I probably contributed to that anger.
Right.
you know?
Right.
So when that happens, like if the other spouse can remain calm and not respond with the emotion, but actually try to understand where is this emotion coming from right now? Whether it's anger, whether it's hurt, whether it's frustration, whether it's, you know, let's say they're attacking you. Like everything in you wants to defend yourself. What I'm saying is make an allowance for their grievance. Now, there are lines that can be crossed. They become violent. They become abusive. That's a whole different conversation.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm just talking about just in the, and if you can do that, the conversation has a chance of moving in a healthy direction.
Right.
This is a really terrible correlation, but I'm going to use it anyway.
All right.
So for years, Nordstrom's would train their employees. I don't really know the state of Nordstrom's today, but so this would have been like the 80s and the 90s. I guess when people still went to big box stores, right? So Nordstrom's would train they're known for their customer service. That when you're dealing with a customer who's angry, keep asking them what else is bothering them until they calm down. So, I can't believe this didn't come with this part. Sir, really sorry. Like, is there anything else that's bothered you about this purchase? Yeah, I paid way too much money for it. Totally understand. Sir, is there anything else you're upset about today?
Right.
My wife. Okay, sir, is there anything else you're upset about? And so what they were trying to train them is you can't solve the problem until they calm down.
Right.
So talk to them as long as you need to, get them back to kind of a calm state, now address the problem.
Sure.
So many times in marriage, we would be better employees at Nordstrom's than we are as husbands and wives.
Yeah.
Like, what if you just try to do that with your spouse? So my spouse is upset, angry, hurt, all that, and like I respond in kindness to kind of get them back to being calm.
Right.
So that would be the first thing. The second thing I would say is it is okay to say, would you be all right if we circled back around to this in about 10 or 15 minutes? Can you give me 20 minutes? Can I have 30 minutes? I have found that this one's really hard for wives. Like, but if ladies, if your husband looks at you and says, "I hear you, I can tell you're upset, angry, mad, hurt, frustrated. I genuinely care. I just need a minute. I don't want to respond out of anger. I don't want to say something I'm going to regret. You've been thinking about this all day. I kind of feel like it just got sprung on me in real time.
Right.
Do you mind if I take a minute?" That was one of the things that marriage counselor told us, to give each other permission to do that. Now you got to circle back around to it.
Sure.
And so I would say just those little tactics and communication, when everybody communicates fine when they're not upset.
Right.
It's when you get upset. Can you do some things when you're upset that keep the conversation from getting worse?
Yeah.
That's all.
Well, that's really good. Well, I think this has been a really good discussion. My goodness, I've loved everything we've talked about. I love this series. I'm looking forward to continuing it this Sunday, 9:30 and 11, of course, online beginning at 7 a.m. and every hour on the hour. Want to give folks a little preview about what's coming up here at Vaughn Forest. On March 11th, we have a night for our ladies, our women.
Women's
and
conference.
women's. It's just kind of a fun women's night. There's going
Yeah.
to be some great food, and I think Matt, you're doing some worship for it. Is that right?
Yeah. Joya is, and I'll be there.
Okay.
To help.
Yeah. Well, that'll be fun.
Since it's a ladies' night, I don't think that.
I think they've got like a panel of women.
Yeah.
They're going to be
Yeah.
talking about a lot of different things.
kind of similar to this, just what's going on.
The
today.
registration for that's gone really well so far.
Okay.
We got a lot of women who've already registered, and part of the registration process is they can submit some questions or topics they would like
that's
to hear
cool.
discussed that
Yeah,
night.
that's
so
really cool.
ladies, it's going to be awesome event.
Yeah.
It's free.
Yeah.
We're paying for all the food kind of out of the Be a Light, offering.
Okay.
That was one of the things that we wanted to do is make sure we're continuing to kind of help people experience community.
Yeah,
sure.
So dads, you've got the kids.
Yeah.
That night, put it down on your calendar. It's not babysitting if they're your kids.
Right.
It's called being a dad. So you're going to be a
called
dad
being a
that
parent.
night. You're going to keep the kiddos. Let mom go. Let her
Yeah.
have a good time with other ladies. It's going to be a lot of fun. What's the date again?
So that's March 11th.
March
That's a
11th.
Friday night. And I
Okay.
believe it's like 6:30 to
6:30.
9 or something along those lines.
Sounds
I'm not 100%
about right.
sure.
Yeah.
But if you do want to register for that, any of our social media, vaughnforest.com. If you scroll down, you'll see it there on the events, and you can register for free, which is amazing. And I know the ladies that are putting this event on, the food's going to be fantastic.
Yeah.
So congratulations, Matt. You'll get to be there. Maybe you'll get to eat a little bit, but anyway, probably not. All right. Well, we appreciate you guys tuning in. Again, I'm really looking forward to continuing this series, talking about parenting and post-parenting world this Sunday. So thanks for listening in on episode number 25, and we will see you guys next time.